On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, Sam Presti tips off the season with his annual preseason media availability.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for SI Thunder, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO ThunderPod. On today's show, joining us is Daniel Bell, basketball guru D on Twitter, Black Sports Online, and 1077 The Franchise to discuss Sam Presti's press conference. And Daniel, it's finally here. Whenever Sam Presti takes the podium, it just feels like we're back.
Yeah, that's the official start of Thunder season. Like, I know other teams have their unofficial start, but this is ours. When Sam Presti speaks, everybody listens, and now it's time to get ready.
It's time to get ready because Monday's media day. We'll be at training camp all week long next week. It's going to get really rolling really fast. Even in the preseason, the Thunder play 3 games in 4 nights. I don't know if we're ready for that yet. They're not going to ease us into it.
I shouldn't even realize that now that you say it. Is one of the games in Tulsa?
Yeah, they go to San Antonio, OKC, Tulsa in 3 days and 4 nights. It's just, I don't know if we're ready for that, Daniel. They're going to take the training wheels off a little bit prematurely here, but we'll try to make it anyway. Daniel, Sam Presti's press conference happened today. What was your biggest takeaway as we left Thunder Ion?
I think it was the parts where he was talking about continuity. He mentioned that I think it was 18 times today is what I counted. I could be wrong about how many times that, but I counted at least 18 times where he mentioned continuity. So that's really important to him, and he kind of wanted to temper expectations with the continuity because he knows, you bring in 2 guys like Caruso and Hardenstein who are expected to play a lot onto a team where that got compared to a college team with how close they were and already had that continuity. He knows that it's not going to be a thing that they can figure out overnight where, there's already discussions. Is Hardenstein going to play with Chet? Is he not going to play with Chet? And then you have the Caruso. Who does he fit with? Who does he play with? You just got to figure that out. So he kind of tempered expectations and said that he mentioned, I think his exact words were, we're going to possibly lose some battles to win the war. So early on, they're probably going to be trying to figure out the continuity, especially on and off the court. So that was probably the biggest thing to me, is where he knows that this is not going to be an easy process of trying to make these things fit. And I'm a baker myself, so I kind of thought of it as like you're making a cake and you have the right pieces, the right ingredients in Chet or in Hardenstein and Caruso. Those pieces fit with the things that Thunder already have going on, but they're like vanilla and baking powder. Yes, those are the right ingredients, but how much baking powder, how much vanilla do you put in? Too little, cake is going to be unleveled and not taste disgusting. Too much is going to be unleveled, and it's going to be too fluffy and it's too sweet. But if you put just the right mix of vanilla and baking powder, it's going to be evenly leveled and perfect amount of flavoring. So, like I said, I'm a baker, so that's what I thought. That's the first thing I thought of when he mentioned the continuity with those 2 guys.
This is another example of Daniel bragging about being a baker, but he's never made anything for the beat. But that's okay. We'll let that slide. His talk about expectations and about continuity are also my biggest takeaway. And I think that they give us a lot of jumping off points. The first one, as you mentioned, whenever he talked about losing a battle to win the war, I think that was kind of a smoke signal of they of course want to win every single time that they're on the court. But just like last year, they're not going to get to 57 wins by only playing 8 guys. Like, whoever you envision being their best 8 players, they're not going to pull Tom Thibodeau and only play those guys from start to finish. And it might cost them. And it cost them at times a little bit last year. But even for whatever you think it cost them last year, they won 57 games. So I still think that this year the focus is on like you mentioned, how do you get the right amount of Caruso and the right amount of Hartenstein? They're the right players, but how do you get the right amount of them blended together with what you know works from last year's recipe and with whoever steps up and whoever takes another leap, and how you need to adjust their minutes as well. So I would say be prepared to see a night where they play 13 guys and they might lose by 5, and you think, well, if you only play these 8, you would have won. That is true, and of course you want to win, but they win in the long run by the data points that they accumulate even in those losses. And at the end of the day, the Thunder are more invested in trying to win a championship. They were the 1 seed last year, and they lost in the second round. Like, this whole season is to win a championship. It's not to be the 1 seed or to win 60 games. Like, it all matters, and they're going to try to check off all those boxes. But the most important thing is, how do you prepare yourself for what it takes to win a playoff series? And what it takes to win a playoff series is being able to mix and match lineups and understanding what advantages and disadvantages that you have. And so you've got to spend the 82-game season getting that data.
Yeah, you don't go into a season, and that's every championship team that's ever been. They don't go into a season knowing what works automatically. I mean, even the teams that go back-to-back, they don't go in knowing what's going to work because that's not the same exact team from the previous year. So Thunder, it's asinine to think that Thunder will go into the season and say, oh, yeah, the starting lineup is going to be Shea, Dub, Lou, Chet, and Hartenstein. Like, that is asinine because they don't know if that works or not. So they're going to have to figure that out, going to have to figure out which lineups work best with which. And I imagine since fans are fans, there's going to be some nights where Mark gets blamed and say, well, Mark should have played Hartenstein a lot more at the 5, or he should have started Caruso, or he should have started Isaiah Joe. Like, there's going to be nights where Mark unfairly gets blamed because he's trying to figure out what exactly works. And it's going to be he's thinking about the long game. What's going to work for June or hopefully when they get to June, or what, May, April, like what's going to work in the playoffs. We saw what worked in the playoffs. We saw what didn't work in the playoffs. Now let's figure out what works with this team and for long term. And that's probably the thing that they're going to be thinking about. And that's probably what he was talking about when he said we're going to lose some battles to win the war.
Yeah, and I think that there are parts of this press conference where he was tempering expectations a bit, and I'll tell you why that's right coming up. But first, want to say right now about our good friends over at FanDuel. Daniel, FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and NFL fans, you can start this season big on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. It is the place to be if you want to bet on professional football, college football, or any sport in general. Make sure you check them out today at FanDuel. And right now, new customers can start out big with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with a $5 bet. But it's not just football. If you're only into basketball, they already have opening night lines out there for the Oklahoma City Thunder taking on the Denver Nuggets on opening night. Thunder, 2.5-point underdogs. You can go lay that down at FanDuel.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Check out Locked On NBA for the national show. Check out Locked On Sooners, Locked On Pokes as college football is hot and heavy locally. More on that later. Today joining us is Daniel Bell at Basketball Guru D, Black Sports Online, and 107.7 The Franchise. Daniel, whenever Sam Presti was talking today about expectations, you could already sense what's going to follow that on social media, which is a sport nowadays. So congratulations, we're both athletes, although you already were. You could already see of like, why is he downplaying this? Why is he dancing around? Why don't he just say that they're title contenders? I think he practically did say that they're title contenders, but a couple things. Number one, there is no positive outcome from him outright stating that they're title contenders because only one team's going to win it. And we know how this cycle works. If you say we're in position to win a championship and you lose in the second round in a tough Western Conference, you are the laughing stock for the next however many weeks until something new pops up. So that's number one. But number two is what he highlighted in here of lost in the sugar rush of adding Caruso, of adding Hartenstein, of bolstering this roster, is the fact that your core nucleus is still Shea, J-Dub, Chet. This Thunder team will not win a championship unless Chet and J-Dub are prepared to be the second and third options. Everything else is great. Everything else is fantastic roster construction. The draft pick of Kaysen, the signing of Hartenstein, the trade for Caruso, that's fantastic. But it's a star-driven league, and you need these 3 guys to step up. One of them, for sure, will be a number 1 option in the playoffs. He proved it last year. But the other 2 might not be there yet. And so whenever you're putting these title or bust expectations on the Thunder, and that's the only way for them to get a passing grade is to go to the finals, I would really caution against that. And I know you're sick and tired of hearing that they're young, but the bottom line is this is postseason number 2 for your second and third option. Go look at every single player who you consider a winner, who you consider to have the intangibles, who you consider a champion. See what they did in postseasons 2 and 3. It's just unfair. Now, could they win the title? Absolutely. It's why it's a popular pick. I'm not handicapping them or sealing them at not winning it, but if they don't win it, it's not as dire as it would feel for a typical, favorite at this point.
Yeah, I mean, just look at every single, like you mentioned, every single young player, every single young team. It's rare. Like Magic came in winning a championship. That's like, what is that? I mean, how many? I think that's the only one that's I can think of. I mean,
of course, a very unique scenario.
Yeah, there's probably some along the way that have done it, but Magic is the one that sticks out that has won a championship at a young age. But he came into the NBA on the team with the MVP in Kareem, and the Lakers were championship ready. They just needed that extra piece in Magic. I mean, you look at LeBron, didn't win until year 9, I think it was. Jordan, year 7. The GOAT, Kobe, year 4. Just not kidding about Kobe being the GOAT. You see the jersey, but I mean, you talk about great players in playoff runs 2 and 3. Kobe was airballing game-winning shots and getting swept in playoff runs 2 and 3 and 4, or 2 and 3. So this is what happens. I mean, just look at the champions from this past season, and Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. Those guys, I mean, they got to the Eastern Conference Finals as Jason Tatum's rookie year, Jalen Brown's second year, and they got to the finals a few years ago and lost. And it just took them, Jason Tatum 6th, 7th year? Took them that long to win a championship, to get over that hump. And so, I mean, you look at the earlier iteration of the Thunder, everybody thought they were going to get back to the championship, but stuff happens. Obviously they were talented, to a very, very talented team. And Sam mentioned how they were in the Western Conference Finals 4 out of 6 years, and the 2 years that they weren't, they had devastating injuries, and they could have gotten to. I mean, I think they were the favorites in 2013, I believe it was, or 2013 or 14. No, 14 was KD's MVP year, so it had to be 13, the year after they went to the finals. But stuff happens, and you never know. These guys just have to take those growing pains, just like every other team and every other player in NBA history. It's just, obviously everybody's on their favorite. They would like to turn on switch for their favorite team and say, you're a championship contender. You're a champion now. It doesn't work that way. Who knows what can happen? It takes a lot of luck. I don't care what anybody says. Every team in NBA history has to have luck to win a championship. Some of their own, some with other teams, but every team has to have some type of luck, and the Thunder are no different.
And luck is whenever preparation meets opportunity. The Thunder have prepared to go and win a championship. They've done everything right, just as the Celtics did. The entire core, the entire time that Tatum and Brown have been in the league, the Celtics had one of the best executives in the sport twice. They've had high-quality coaches, as the Thunder do, on both cases. And they've had an incredibly talented young core that continued to supplement with high-quality talent, i.e. whenever you now bring in Caruso and Hartenstein. So it's like, even the Celtics that you mentioned, I'm glad you brought them up. Like, they kept beating their head into a wall until they finally bursted through a year ago. So I think that this Thunder team rightfully is being picked to win a championship. It's being picked to go to the Western Conference Finals or better. That's all true. Spoiler alert, I'm going to pick them also to go at least to the Western Conference Finals. But by the same token, I feel that there's going to be, at the end of the year, if they don't hoist the Larry O'Brien trophy, or at least if they don't get to the NBA Finals, there's going to be this sense of disappointment. It's difficult to get me there of like, oh, this was a disappointing or worse year, just because of how tough the West is and how much of an anomaly it would take for postseason 2 and 3 for this team to get into the NBA Finals as like their bar of success. I think that there's still a way to have a positive season without going to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's upsetting when anybody's team. I've been upset as a Lakers fan for years. Been upset as a Tennessee fan for years because they don't win a championship. It's upsetting when you don't win a championship, obviously, especially when you're a talented team. But it's also important to know that that's not the end of the world. And even though they don't get to the championship, or if they don't get to the championship, or if they don't win the championship, it's not going to be a failure of a season. A failure of a season to this team not making the playoffs, because after what we saw last year, if this team doesn't make the playoffs, that's a failure, and every fan should be upset. Or even if they don't get out of the first round, that should obviously help if everybody's healthy and everything. But those are the things that you should be upset about and should consider quote unquote failures. But not winning a championship, it's not a failure. It's not upsetting. Obviously, that's the end goal, obviously, and you got to put everything into context. But 2019's failed to win a championship.
And it's not as though there's no expectations. There clearly are, and there should be, of, if this team's fully healthy, you better make the playoffs. I'd say if this team's fully healthy, you better be a home court advantage seed, and you better get out of the first round. Anything short of that, whenever you have a healthy season with this current roster, is a failure. And I will say that right now. I'll say that in May. If you're fully healthy and you don't check off those boxes, it is a failure. But past that, I've got to see how it looks. Like if there's still no progress toward getting to the Western Conference Finals or getting there or whatever, then we have a different conversation. But I think just blanketing in and they've got to go to the conference finals or it's going to be a disappointment or a failure, I think that's a bit astray from where things should be, just because of how young they are and because we are literally not watching. We haven't watched Chet and J-Dub become a 2 and 3, which is what it's going to take. We can talk till the cows come home about how great this roster is from 4 down and how great the number 1 is and how great the coach is. If you don't have the second and third options, it doesn't matter. And that's a ton of pressure to put on second-year guys in terms of postseason. But that's what the deal is in the NBA, and they know that. Those two guys work harder than anybody. Those two guys understand the pressure that comes with it. But it's not to say that if you can't win this year, you're never going to win. And I think that's what we're trending towards if the hyperbole keeps up. But I just think that this team will be among the title contenders and will be in the Western Conference Finals and could win the championship. I just think that Sam was right to throttle things back to, hey, this team is still exceptionally young. I guess this team is it would still take an anomaly to win the championship. And this team is of all the makes of the anomaly, by the way. This team has all the makings of a historic team, but it would still be historic.
Yeah, and he knows, like he mentioned, how they're trying to break the mold of or go against the rule of being a young team that can win in this league or win a championship in this league. Because I can't even think of the last young team to win a championship that was led. I mean, obviously there have been teams, Magic, Lakers, that have won, but that's a veteran team with, again, the MVP and Kareem, who had been in the league for years. I mean, Larry Bird, and then when they won, they were a young team, or he was young at the time, but he was a little bit older, and there was a lot of vets on that team. So I just really can't think of a young team that has just won with the core being so young. So Sam mentioned that that's what they're trying to do, and they can do it. They have the make to do it, the talent, the depth, the physicality, everything you want in a team to do it. The coach, it's just everything has to go their way, and they know that, and they got to put in the work for everything to go their way.
Coming up, let's talk Alex Caruso, as Sam Presti, I think, said one of the more interesting things tonight about him. But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at Gametime. Daniel, you went to a very fun football game this weekend at OU. And I don't know about you, I have hardly been there. I was at OU in 2014 when Tennessee was in town. But past that, I have not been to their stadium. So I need Gametime's help when buying tickets at a venue like that, because Gametime offers you a view from your seat, so you know exactly what you're getting into at these venues where you might not be as familiar with their layout. I also love the Gametime all-in pricing. There is no surprise fees. It's all right there up front for you on what you're going to pay, and it's the lowest prices guaranteed, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So go there right now to Gametime by downloading the app, creating your account, and using code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create your account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. It's game time. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, media member, and SI Thunder beat writer Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO Thunderpod. Joining me today is Daniel Bell. Daniel from BSO 1077 The Franchise. Alex Caruso, the newest addition for the Thunder on the perimeter. He was traded for with Giddey, kind of swapping out expiring contracts. He's not eligible for an extension until December. But did you get the vibe that the way that Sam Presti talked about those future discussions made it kind of seem like a win, not an if they're going to extend him?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the number has to be right for both sides, because you're not going to extend Caruso for $20 million over 4 years, because he's worth way more than that. So, and I'm not saying the Thunder would give him that or give him that offer that low. I'm just saying the number has to be right. But yeah, it sounded like it's just going to be a matter of time of, obviously, when the time can't happen, they're going to figure out a deal. And because, I mean, one, why not? Especially if things go well, which why wouldn't things go well? Caruso has made it work everywhere he's been so far in the NBA. So you have he's an all-NBA defender. He's a really good three-point shooter. He's a really good connector. He's a guy that does all the dirty work. So, I mean, he checks every single box. So all it's going to take is making sure that number meets both sides. And I would be extremely shocked if Caruso wasn't part of this team long term.
Yeah, it seemed like all signs were trending toward like the second he's eligible, they're going to get it done. Now, maybe it doesn't go that way, but just the way that he talked about them understanding how he impacts the team as a player and that familiarity from his previous stint with the Blue, it sounded pretty good of how things are trending on that front. I know that that's a topic that's gotten put on the back burner to some extent because they literally cannot do anything right now, no matter what, because he's not eligible for an extension yet. But it is something that's still pertaining to the future of the team. So it was addressed today, and it looks good right now. All returns are good so far for the Caruso eventual extension in his future in Oklahoma City being, as Sam said, they hope it's for a very long time.
Yeah, and I think something to really keep in mind is this past summer we saw a lot of teams, if not all teams, pay attention to that second apron and try to avoid it, do everything they can to avoid it, except for the Celtics, whose owners paid the money and got up out of there. But I think that's something that's going to be really important to keep in mind. Like, that's why I think the number is really important. If this was the old NBA or the old CBA, I think it'd be just like an easy 100% no-brainer, and it's Caruso pretty much give him a blank check. But now I think you have to keep in mind of that second apron, because J-Dub and Chet's extensions are going to be, or they're going to be extension eligible after this season. So that and those numbers I have calculated, they are very, very, very big. So, and that's those two Ricky Max extensions that you're going to have to give out this summer. So you, obviously the Thunder, they've in the past have shown that they will pay a tax bill. It's just a matter of how much that tax bill is going to be, especially if the team is championship contending. But trying to stay away from that second apron I think is going to be very important for the Thunder in the future.
It'll be very important for the Thunder and for every team, like you mentioned. And that's where depth is a big portion of this. And I thought that the way Sam described depth was interesting. It could be a sign of maybe a trend where we've seen NBA teams go super short with their rotations. Mark kind of the outlier and someone who's gotten some attention either negatively or positively about how he plays 10 to 13 guys a night. And that's kind of been an anomaly for what most teams do. But the way he talked about how important that is was a little eye-opening of just the multi-layers of importance whenever you really sit back and count up all the ways that it's impacted. You mentioned the cram schedule, especially post NBA Cup. That's a new wrinkle where you need these depth pieces. Even though we haven't seen like them go to 85 games or something, so maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, it's still 82. The thing that he triggered for me was, yeah, but we talk all the time about possessions going up in games, so you're playing almost more basketball in a way, more high intensive basketball than you used to, even if it's still just the same blanketed 82. That was interesting because I think that we talk about that stat a lot. We never really, at least for me, put it into context of what it actually means of more possessions, more wear and tear. And so you want to have these guys to get through that. And then he also highlighted how guys are just simply more athletic now, like the torque and the explosiveness of these players. Like you just need to save, I don't know if this is the right verbiage, but save themselves from themselves of like the toll that goes through any given night. And the league is so competitive now that you want to have the ability to go top to bottom and not just punt on your bench and hope for the best. Like it's just a very multi-layered thing where I wonder if this where we look at Mark as being ahead of the curve on playing deeper into his bench for the sake of having enough guys to play deep and manage the load while still winning games.
Yeah, even myself was a little critical of Mark late in the season about not shortening the roster because the assumption was he's going to be just like everybody else and shorten that roster for the playoffs because the saying is the roster shortens in the playoffs or whatever the saying is. I forgot the verbiage, but he didn't. And then he said something along the lines of alluding to we have and built a deep team. One, it's not fair to guy 11 on the team on the bench to not play for no reason other than just shortening the roster because we're in the playoffs. And two, we built this deep team. Why not use it? And there's not a drop off from guy 8 to 11 or 13. I forgot the number that he mentioned, but there wasn't a drop off with the guys that he was playing. So why not use it? And it kind of made me think like, yeah, if you build a deep team, what's the point of building a deep team if you're not going to use it in the playoffs? Because I mean, the playoffs get much more physical. The refs swallow their whistle a lot more, and even more than what they did after the All-Star break last year. So why not use that depth? Why? And I think you're right that Mark might be ahead of the curve because when you have a deep team, it really makes no sense not to use it just because it's the playoffs. If you feel like a guy can help you, if you feel like he can contribute to winning, use them. I mean, don't leave him on the bench and wait for another guy to get hurt or another guy to not be playing well. Just go out there and you continue what you've been doing. And obviously the season didn't end the way the Thunder wanted to, but Mark is still pretty right about the using all the guys that he had.
Yeah, and I think that that's important as well for the aspect of team building and camaraderie of not wanting to just shorten it for the sake of shortening it. And part of it is it takes someone to take that initial leap of I'm not going to do things the way it's always done to open the door for others to do that as well. But Daniel, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you joining us. We'll have to do this again very soon. And we'll have to sing Rocky Top together very soon because our Tennessee Volunteers went into Norman, Oklahoma, and absolutely broke in to their kitchen, made a ham and cheese sandwich, and threw the wrapper on the floor, Daniel. It was a huge win for Tennessee, a huge win for us. Let them know where they can find all your stuff for after this show.
Basketball Guru on Twitter and Instagram, Black Sports Online, BSO on Twitter. Or X, I forgot that's the name now. 1077, the franchise, 9 to 11. Also going to be filling in some, do the OU post game, some OU pre games. We'll be doing OU pre game this Saturday, 7 to 9, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., and then post game, obviously after the game and the OU post game. So I'm everywhere, man. Y'all can't get rid of me.
He's everywhere. We don't want to get rid of him, despite what the text line might say. But Daniel, you keep crushing it as a massive radio star. I aspire to be you someday, Daniel. But until then, be good and be good to one another.